Just a reminder, you can catch me recording this podcast live on AMP. AMP is a new live radio app that lets you call in and chat with me in person while recording. Get the app on Apple's App Store and make sure you follow me at John Middlekauff to get notified when I go live. Live here on AMP on a beautiful, it's getting a little chilly where I'm at, probably where you're at too. Early October, Monday night, Seattle destroys the New York Football Giants. We will dive into that. The Chicago Bears, I'm going to have to say, I told you so. We'll dive in a little bit to the NFC and then a potential blow it up team. But first, subscribe to the podcast, 3 and Out with me, John Middlekauff, wherever you may listen. If you're watching this on YouTube, hammer that like button, subscribe to the page, and leave a comment below in the comment section. Interact with all of our content. We got a lot of stuff flowing. And thevolume.com. We got hats. I'm rocking one right now, as you can see, 3 and Out flex fit hats. Go check that out, thevolume.com. Before we dive into football, what I need you to do is I need you to grab your cell phone. I need you to go to a little thing called the App Store. I need you to search Gametime. They happen to be the official ticketing app of this podcast, 3 and Out. You want to go to a game? Do you want to go to a college football game? Do you want to go to an NFL game? The NBA starting up? We obviously have concerts, Taylor Swift, all around the country, as well as comedy shows. They got you covered. Go to Gametime, download the app, and when you do, use the code JOHN. That's my name, John. $20 off your first pair of tickets. It's excellent, easy to use, interactive, with price points on every seat, easy to find. They have little views wherever the venue are that you're going to. I would love to, I'm going to have to set this up in 2024. I'm going to go to an SEC game. Watching that Ole Miss LSU game, I want to experience something like that. It's hard if I don't plan way ahead, but that is something, surely with my friends at Gametime, I'm going to figure out for 2024. I was thinking about the Super Bowl, especially if the Niners go in Vegas. I might have to, talk to my buddies at Gametime. You should too. Gametime right now. Promo code John, $20 off. Okay, Monday Night Football. Listen, we hang our hat on honesty, authenticity on this show, and I'm just going to lay this out before I dive into the game. I watched it, as I do every game, as I will this Thursday game. Hell, I'm moving this week. I got a hot spot, and I will watch every play of Commanders Bears. I do it for you. If that game would have been on Sunday morning, the 10 a.m. slate, where there was a large slate, that would have been in a little box on like my third TV, and I would have watched very little. And if you're not a Giants or a Seahawks fan, you would agree. Now, if you gambled on the game, if you have a fantasy player, maybe you would be a little more locked in on Sunday. But when you put a game like that on Monday Night Football, and this was the crazy part about the league, right? I mean, Seattle, obviously, Geno got a little banged up. They were a little off. Those are 2 playoff teams. Now, there are 7 seeds, right? Seattle was the 7 seed. The Giants were the 6. But I bet when they were putting the schedule together at New York, who, hell, I was wrong. I thought they'd be a playoff team again. In Seattle, like, not a bad little game. Not a bad little wild card matchup. And it really wasn't. It was Seattle beat the living piss out of them. And let's start with them, because I want to be happy. I want to start on the positive note. And I think Seattle deserves a lot of credit. And, like, when you watch that game tonight, it doesn't take Howie Roseman or Brian Daboll or Jerry Jones to realize the talent discrepancy in that game. Now, both teams had key guys out. Cross, the left tackle for Seattle. Obviously, Saquon and Thomas out for the Giants. But when you watch Seattle a couple years ago, everyone was shitting on them. And this was when Russell was on the team, and ultimately they pivoted. And right now you see 2 guys in their early 70s, which in the last couple years have lost Hall of Fame quarterbacks, Belichick and Pete Carroll. And one guy made the playoffs last year and looks headed there again. The other guy is in shambles and looks like he's going to win 6 games. You know a big difference between the 2 operations? I'll give you 2 words. John Snyder. Belichick doesn't lean on a GM. Belichick picks all the players. He doesn't listen to anybody. Pete Carroll and John Schneider have been tied at the hip for a long time, and they've swung and they've missed. And I've always given them a lot of credit for willing to get up to the plate and swing for the fences. And listen, you saw tonight, Jamal Adams, who's been banged up with a million injuries the last couple years, makes his debut, gets kneed in the head, and wants to kill the doctor 9 plays after getting yanked off the field for a concussion, right? And I don't blame him. That's a reaction usually from players. They don't want to be told they're not allowed to go back, especially when you factor in the circumstances. But let's face it, that is a move they would definitely like a redo. But look at all the talent they had on that field. And a lot of it is recently drafted. You know Kenneth Walker, that guy running all over the place? You know the reason before Mel Tucker couldn't keep his fingers off his cell phone calling Brenda Taylor and got himself in some trouble and ultimately lost his job? Kenneth Walker got that guy $90 million. Because you remove $90 million from that guy's coaching resume, he's terrible. He's not a $5 million coach total. Kenneth Walker is a stud. DK Metcalf, baller. This draft, they had a really tough decision. When I think Pete Carroll in Seattle, and really Pete Carroll, Seattle/USC, I think, yeah, he'll take some flyers on some character guys because usually that guy can play. He'll go with his Percy Harvins. He did it with a lot of guys at USC. It's like, yeah, this guy's a little bit of a wild card, but the dude has talent. So it's like, God, Seattle's going to take Jalen Carter at number 5. You can see it coming from a mile away. It was a no-brainer. And then they get their pick, and they take the corner/safety, nickel, do it all from Illinois Witherspoon. And you're watching him tonight, and the number one, obviously he had the pick 6. He was flying around making TFLs. My big takeaway from him is like, that reminds me of a defensive back that would have played with Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, and Earl Thomas. He feels LOB. But this speaks to the cohesion of Pete and John Schneider and the importance of having a coach and GM. Clearly, they both need to be talented, and obviously both guys are, but they respect each other, they believe in each other, and they work well to each other because they've pivoted. The move off Russell Wilson, the players they've acquired since, is pretty evident. Now, are they a Super Bowl contender? Hard to be with Geno Smith. And I like the guy. And that's a pretty damn good move. But that team has a lot of talent. That team is equipped. And they're not going away because a lot of their talent is now young. And I think Pete got kind of, as the kids would say, drugged for a long time on the internet because like, oh, Russell Wilson's just carrying his ass. No, actually, he knows what he's doing. Pretty good coach. Now his coaching staff, his defensive coordinator tonight had 75 sacks. His offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, I guess Liam Cohen actually is back with the Rams, but he has a Rams guy as well in Seattle. Like they just know what they're doing. And I have a lot of respect for Seattle and this post-Russell Wilson pivot that they made. And the talent on the field is just evident. And I enjoy watching them. I think they're just good. And if Geno can stay healthy, a little scare there. But, I mean, that's a double-digit win team, and that's, probably the 6th seed in the NFC. The NFL season is going strong, and DraftKings Sportsbook is hooking up new customers with an offer that's even stronger. Bet $5 on any game this week to score $200 instantly in bonus bets. And DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of a sweetener offer every game day this October. Get in on the game day greatness. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN, J-O-H-N. New customers can score $200 instantly in bonus bets when you bet 5 on the NFL. That's code JOHN only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. The crown is yours. Now on the flip side, the number one story coming out of tonight is going to be Daniel Jones, who threw a couple picks, a pick 6, and has just looked pretty bad this season. And it's always easy to play Monday morning quarterback, but there is no disputing that his agents and his representation in this offseason, they bent over the Giants management, Joe Schoen, and ownership. Because I always thought the easy move and just the simple move, you're not just going to let him walk. Who's going to play quarterback for you? Just franchise tag him. And then basically get a 2-year sample size of what you view he is. Because right now, if Daniel Jones was playing on the franchise tag, while he would be overpaid, you'd go, listen, you're not tied to him past this year. You can make a pivot if this year's shitty. It's not that big a deal. Everyone understands that you were kind of, between a rock and a hard place. You were stuck and you did it, right? But when you gave him the big money, you open yourself up to criticism when he plays like he's been playing. And let's face it, he's not playing very good. He looks awful. and he's making a ton of money. And part of making a ton of money is having the ability, if Saquon has a rolled ankle and you're missing, a tackle, that I can still make enough plays to give us a chance to win. And not only can he not do that, he's the opposite. He loses you games. So when I look at the Giants' financial decisions, they had two guys that were free agents, or hitting free agency, right? Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones. My thought all along was franchise the quarterback, let Saquon hit the market, and just be willing. What was he going to get? Who was going to give Saquon Barkley $20 million guaranteed? Now, ultimately, you gave him essentially like 11 or 12 with the franchise tag, but you would have gladly given him a 2-year deal. Who was giving him some massive money? So to me, financially, the reason I thought Brian Daboll was the coach of the year last year, their team's not that good. They don't have that many impact players. It was on full display tonight. The talent on their team is nowhere near Seattle. And Seattle last year was a 7 seed. And this year they've added Witherspoon, who's a big addition, right? Might help win them an extra game, right? So instead of being a 9-win team, they're a 10-win team. But that's not like a 14-win team. And when you look at the Giants, their margin for error never was that big because this isn't 07. This isn't 11. Kiwanuka, JPP, all those guys ain't walking through the door. Justin Tuck in his prime. That's not this squad. Kayvon Thibodeau is an interesting player. He's got a long way to go. And offensively, right, they're missing some weapons just in general on their team. They literally don't have that many. So when you look at the Giants, once you overpay the quarterback and your team's not that talented, your margin for error dramatically shrinks. And you watch tonight, everyone's thinking it. God, we'd like that contract back. God, that was a mistake. I mean, we're 4 games into this thing. And I think the easy solution was just you franchised the wrong player because you would have been able to re-sign the other player. Again, I will ask this out loud. Who was giving Saquon Barkley 3 for 30? Who was doing that? The entire league won't pay any of these running backs. Their own guys, which they like. The Colts love Jonathan Taylor. The Raiders love Josh Jacobs. None of them will pay these guys. So I think the Giants fell under the trap of they let emotion, say what you want about Belichick, not going well, but the reason he was such a great GM with Brady was no emotion. He could make decisions purely on business, become very black and white, positive, negative. There wasn't a lot of gray area with him. He didn't really love the way Saquon represents the team. A lot of guys represent their team well. Is he worth the money or is he not? Is he worth letting hit free agency or are you going to franchise tag him? Daniel Jones, he is just such a class act. A lot of class acts in the NFL. Are you going to give him $80 million? Or can you just play him one season, $30 million and figure it out from there and have a difference of $50 million, right? Can we make unemotional decisions? And one knock historically on the Giants is they really get emotionally tied to guys, which I'm human. I do too. You do too. But when you're talking, it's one thing if it's a $7 million player. It's another thing when you're paying a quarterback over $40 million a year. And that's how, when you get emotionally tied, you make mistakes. And I understand Brian Daboll, he needs a quarterback, but you saw him tonight. You saw the reaction tonight after the pick six. When he goes over to him, shakes his head, then he grabs the tablet and essentially throws it as Daniel Jones was standing right there. I thought Troy Aikman summed it up pretty well. The only positive on Daniel Jones is how the hell does he not lose it? Because a lot of those sacks, and I think there were 10 of them tonight, which is kind of crazy from a team that struggles to rush the passer. Very telling of the Giants' offensive line, which is not great, that they got issues. And I think for the Giants, I don't know if it's going to get much better. Now, Saquon comes back. Maybe Darren Waller, kind of his role grows, but it's pretty ugly, and it's gotten ugly fast. So Seattle's trending up. The Giants are trending down. And thank God that game's over, and get ready for Commanders-Bears. Now, speaking of the Bears, let me preface this whole rant by saying I don't pretend to know more about player personnel than Ryan Poles. Like, if you just ask Ryan Poles about every guy drafted the last 5 years, he could rattle off 99% of the guy's strengths, weaknesses, their background. Like, he knows player personnel. Just like if you asked Eberflus to get on a whiteboard, I wouldn't know 5% of just overall defense or X's and O's compared to the guy. So I'm not acting like I know more about being a GM than Ryan Poles, or I know more about X's and O's than Eberflus. But I've been watching football long enough. I've been around the game long enough, and I've seen situations in my time working in football, close to football, doing this for a living that are just no-brainers. I would consider them BP fastballs. Like, it's just, this is too easy. It doesn't get any easier than this. There are complicated situations. Hell, I'd even go back to the Giants. I understand the Saquon Daniel Jones free agency was complicated. It's easy to play Monday morning quarterback, and we're going to do it, but I'll be the first to raise my hand. It was complicated. Just like Seattle probably passing on Jalen Carter, even if they love Witherspoon. Like, that takes some balls. Like, Jalen Carter's going to be good. He'd be good for you. To me, after week one, and you had lost whatever, you had finished the season last year, 10 straight losses. You had lost this. You had not won a game since October of 2022. And that video, which by the time it went viral to us with Chase Claypool, of him refusing to run routes, of him not blocking, they had seen it. These coaches get in and grade the tape. Some grade the tape that night. A lot of them get in at like 4 or 5 in the morning and grade the tape on game weeks. They had seen it over and over again. By the moment they see it, then their players are going to see it. And restarting, and I think culture and some of that stuff can be overused, right? Like, how do we change the culture? How do we get the ship headed in the right direction? A lot of that, and I truly believe that this is not as much the message from the coach. It's not the rah-rah speech from Mike Vrabel or John Harbaugh, right? Or even your position coaches. It's the character of the players you have, right? When you watch, now that they're in the media, like Julian Edelman or Gronk really get kind of nerdy talking football, you're like, God, these guys love football. No wonder Tom loved these guys. No wonder these guys fit in with McCourty and Slater and Hightower, and that group won the Super Bowls in the 2010s. Or you watch some of the guys that played with Peyton Manning, right? Talk. Robert Mathis, Dwight Freeney, Clark, Reggie Wayne. You're just like, God, I get it. I see it. The character and the culture starts from your players. And young players, just like young people, were easily influenced, right? You get to a certain point in time when they're like, don't worry about what other people say. That's easy for the 50-year-old to say it. It's another thing telling the 21-year-old that, right? Hell, it's taken me. I still struggle with it, and I'm a couple years away from 40. Now, I've gotten a lot better at it. I'm definitely better at it at 38 than I was 30, but it takes time. And the players, and especially a team with a lot of young, influential players, the moment Claypool did that, to not cut him is the most embarrassing thing any team has done, right? Honestly, I thought the Raiders with the Chandler Jones situation is like, what are you guys doing? He's not playing for you. You're not allowing him to come. Just remove him, right? And it took him getting arrested for them to do it. It's like, why does it take this long? These situations aren't that complicated. But when the story broke on Sunday morning that they're trying to trade Chase Claypool and he's not allowed to be with the team, and then Eberflus said they let him choose, and then it was reported actually they didn't let him choose. He's not allowed to be with the team. He's still not allowed to be with the team. He has no trade value. Like, you traded for him, and you gave up a lot, pick 32. It was a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. The Niners drafted Trey Lance. Howie Roseman took Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson. It's fucking football. It's hard. Whatever. You made a mistake. It's a shitty mistake, but you made it. Move on. Cut the bait. The milk is spilled. Let it go. And for them not to cut him on Monday or Tuesday going into week 2, I think is the most head-scratching move of the season so far. This team sucks. They have so many problems. And the reason you keep losing in all these different fashions, hell, they just had a 28-7 lead, stuff like that. And you can't convince me that stuff like that doesn't matter. Not with losing teams. And there's a reason losing teams keep losing. Like I said, do I think Ryan Poles is just some idiot? I don't. He was around Andy Reid, Brett Veach, John Dorsey. I think he knows player personnel. Eberflus, I don't know about that. I would say no. Poles made a mistake. To not cut this guy the next day is just, it's a joke. It really is. And then to leak out they're trying to trade him. Who in their right mind would trade for this player who, one, did that week 1, and then 2, you've told not to come around anymore. Your stock literally couldn't be any lower. If it was like an actual stock, it'd be 0.0. It has no value. Like another team wouldn't trade you a box of Gatorades for that player. So just cut him. Just do that. Why is it so difficult to do that? I'll never understand it, but just a joke for the Bears. For a limited time, Verizon customers can get Netflix and NFL Plus for just $25 a month with Plus Play. That's $120 in annual savings. Plus Play is a platform where Verizon customers can shop, manage, and save on the subscriptions you already love, like Netflix and NFL Plus. With NFL Plus Premium, you get access to live games on mobile, NFL Red Zone, NFL Network, and more. Just go to Verizon.com/plusplay to bundle and save on Netflix and NFL Plus today for a limited time only. I thought I'd go through a little NFC power ranking / just where we're at, because coming into the season, it was like, oh, the AFC, 10 teams could be like the 3 seed. We got 4 teams could be the 1 seed. The conference is loaded, and the NFC, just a couple teams. Actually, I think it's actually shaping out a little different, because when you look at the NFC, listen, I know the Eagles beat the Niners in the NFC Championship when Purdy got hurt, but I think if you're basing it strictly on 2023, the Niners have played better than the Eagles. And I think clearly those 2 teams in the NFC are more talented than every other team. I would have it Niners 1A, Eagles 1B. And clearly the Niners have more cohesion given that their play caller offensively is the same. And he also is their head coach. The Eagles have 2 new coordinators. I watched a lot of that Washington game. They have clearly just looked off. Like the Niners have had series where they've looked off, but they have not looked off in games. Defensively, they look as good as ever. I actually think this is their best defense of the Shanahan era, especially now adding Hargrave. And offensively, they are dramatically better twofold. One, Purdy is way better than Jimmy Garoppolo ever was. If Jimmy Garoppolo was just like your solid, everyday quarterback that you can win some games with if you have a good operation. If your operation's not like the Raiders, you'll lose. He's just the middle of the road guy. Purdy's better than that. And that's why they're scoring the first time in 49ers history that they have started their first 4 games and scored 30 plus points in each game. And Christian McCaffrey, who was damn good last year, is just completely in his element in 2023. Kyle knows how to use him. He's just an unstoppable force. Now, the Eagles have unlimited talent, right? Offensively, even when they're off, at any moment, A.J. Brown can score a 50-yard touchdown. At any moment, Goddard or Devontae Smith can make a play. At any moment, they can run the ball down your throat. At any moment, one of their defensive linemen can get a sack. So I take them, like I said, 1A, 1B. It just depends how they're playing. Luckily for us, we get to see these 2 teams play a little bit later in the season. Now, I would have on their own tier in the NFC, Dallas, because one thing's clear with the Cowboys. When they get a lead on you, and their defensive line can kind of pin their ears back, they actually are built very similarly to the Jets. The difference is they have an offense, so they get some leads. And when they get leads, they fucking annihilate your quarterback, and they annihilate your offensive line. And clearly, even losing Diggs, all of a sudden you're looking up, you're like, who's this Bland guy? Pick 6s. I mean, he's like high-stepping. Dan Quinn, I don't even know if he was going to get a job last year, but keeping him, he's definitely the highest paid defensive coordinator. Him and Fangio probably make $4 or $5 million to coordinate. That defense, when it's rolling and they get a lead, is awesome. I think the only question, and now we're going to see it this week, Niners, Cowboys. Can the Cowboys, and I talked about this with Colin the other day, win a game? Because I know the Niners can, I know the Eagles can, when you got to be gritty. When you're down like 7 points at halftime. Because it's happened once to the Cowboys this year, and they lost to the Arizona Cardinals. All the other games, the Jets game was their smallest halftime lead. It was 8. Other 2 games were like 20-plus points, and they just boat race you. Well, in the Niner game, if it's like 10-7 at half, can they grit out a win? Because if they can prove that, then I'll take them more seriously. But right now, I view them much more, and this sounds negative, but relative to those 2 teams, more front runners. I think they could grit out a win against these other teams, because to me, Detroit is clearly the 4th best team. And I do think if the gap between Dak and Jared Goff is not that wide, and we'll see how the season plays out, I don't know if it is. Like, is the gap between the Lions and the Cowboys that wide? Now, the Cowboys' defensive backs are better. I would take Dan Quinn over Glenn, the defensive coordinator. But I've been saying this from the offseason. Detroit has players everywhere. They get Jameson Williams back this week because Raj changed the gambling operation. So when you look at the top 4 teams right now in the NFC, it's pretty freaking good. Niners, Eagles, Cowboys, Lions, like that's a real group. I mean, if that's your final 4, there is a ton of Pro Bowlers, all pro level guys, and just high-end NFL talent. Then I think you get this next group. Clearly, the Giants are out and Seattle's in. I mean, Seattle, someone has to win the South, and I know Tampa is currently 3-1. I got to wait and see before I put them. Like, I would take Seattle every day of the week over Tampa. And then we just have a lot of teams. Obviously, someone's going to win that division. Someone's going to host that game. And more than likely, I guess it could change, but if Dallas is your 5 seed, a lot like last year, Dallas would be what? A 7-8 point favorite on the road if they're playing Tampa, or even the Saints with Derek Carr. They would be a massive favorite. And honestly, it's hard to not see them win that game. So, yeah, the rest, the Tampas, even the Rams, there are some random teams. But to me, the top 4 in the NFC is really good. And then I looked at one thing today because we're a couple weeks away from, would this team trade this guy? Would this team throw their hat in the ring with Caleb Williams? Now, the Bears don't really have anyone to trade, right? And right now, they would have the number 1 pick, and the number 2 pick also belongs to them, the Carolina Panthers. So they got a very, very good chance of somehow corralling the number 1 overall pick. And then it's bye-bye Fields, hello Caleb. Even if Caleb's like, I'm not going to play there, I just draft him anyway. Like, that would be my tactic if I was a GM. If his dad was like, we're not playing there, I'd be like, I'm still picking you. We'll see what happens. Here's a $40 million contract. Say no. But when you look at a lot of the other teams in the mix, right? Like Denver, like, who do they really have to trade? Last year they traded Bradley Chubb. Like, they don't really have star players to net them to quote unquote blow it up. The Patriots, hell, their best 2 players just got injured today, and they're not going to trade Christian Gonzalez. I think the only team that currently looks like they're going to really, really suck this year is the Raiders. And I really think you have to ask yourself, what the hell are they doing? Where are they going? How is this going to continue? How can they keep losing this many games with this high-end talent? And if all of a sudden you look up and you're 1-5, like, would you entertain trading Max Crosby if Jamal Adams went for 2 1s and a 2, you couldn't get 2 1s and a 2 for Max Crosby? A young player under contract, turned his life around. I think he's 3 years sober, awesome team captain, high character guy. I saw Richard Sherman, a social clip went out on the Volume Center on his podcast. Like, he's just wasting away there. I was reading a little about Devontae Adams' contract. It's a little harder to trade, but I think Crosby, and listen, Mark Davis is not going to want to trade Max Crosby, but like, what's the plan here? Just always suck? You just move to Vegas to just always be awful? It's hard to fathom. Just a couple of years ago, it felt like they had momentum, and now it feels like they've taken 3 steps backwards. So I think they're a couple more losses away, which, let's face it, they're going to be hard pressed to win games. For them getting some calls with just some massive offers from Max Crosby, and I'd be all over the guy. And my friends at Morgan & Morgan making it look easy. And every single week, there's a guy, there's a coach, there's a player that made Sunday or even Monday night look easy. And I think tonight there wasn't necessarily a guy. Tyreek Hill and Mike McDaniel have had that market cornered the first couple weeks. Khalil Mack. I'll never forget when the Raiders drafted him, going to a practice and seeing, this guy's arms are enormous. And I had a buddy on the staff, and OTAs ended. Now, the Raiders were terrible at the time. He's like, he's not just our best player. We don't have anyone in his world. And within a couple years, he was the defensive player of the year. And let's face it, Khalil got banged up, just hadn't been the same player as last year in Chicago, last year with the Chargers, and even this year with the Chargers. it wasn't looking good. I mean, part of them losing, it's like, where is Khalil Mack? And then you look up yesterday, and it's sack after forced fumble. And the dust settles. The Chargers get an enormous win. All of a sudden, they're 2-2. And you're like, God, the Chargers could make the playoffs. Joey Bosa was missing. They needed that guy to make big plays. And big plays he made. And he actually kind of ribbed the Raiders. He's like, the old number 4, him and Derek were buddies, wouldn't have held on the ball that long. The quarterback made it kind of easy for us. But he had 6 sacks, which only 6 other guys in the history of the league have had in an NFL game. So, listen, I mean, he just needs 5-6 other sacks. All of a sudden, you look up, Khalil Mack has a 14-sack season. So, props to Khalil Mack for making it look easy. Like I said, brought to you by Morgan & Morgan. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/John or dial pound law. That's pound 529. That's forthepeople.com/John. Morgan & Morgan makes helping you out with an injury, auto claim look easy. Pound 529 from your cell. This is a paid advertisement.